I never thought I'd see his face again. Years had passed, whole seasons of my life turned over like pages in a book I never meant to reread. Yet there he was, standing at the edge of my doorway, the same eyes that once held laughter now heavy with something else. Regret, maybe. Or shame. I couldn't tell. All I knew was that the past I'd carefully buried had just been dragged back into the light. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My silence was the only defense I had left. Inside me, a war broke out, memories rising like ghosts, each one whispering, "Don't forget what he did." The betrayal. The broken trust. The nights I cried alone, hoping the pain would finally ease. I had learned to live with that scar. I'd told myself I was fine, that I didn't need closure, that some wounds were better left untouched. But life has a way of testing the stories we tell ourselves. He took a breath. "I know I don't deserve it," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm sorry." It hit me harder than I expected. Not because I believed him, not yet, but because hearing those words made me realize how long I'd been carrying the weight of silence. Forgiveness. The very idea of it used to make me feel weak, like it was giving in, letting him off the hook. But in that moment, standing at the edge of something I didn't understand, I felt something shift. This wasn't about him. This was about me, about whether I was ready to stop letting my pain define me. I still didn't know the answer, but for the first time in years, I was willing to find out. Before the pain, there was peace. Or something like it. We were friends once, the kind who laughed too loud and stayed out too late, swapping secrets like currency. He knew things about me no one else did. I trusted him, not just with my words, but with the fragile parts of myself I didn't show to the world. Back then, everything felt simple. Life had edges, yes, but they were soft, and we moved through it like nothing could touch us. Our bond wasn't perfect, but it was real. And real, I've learned, is rarer than we think. We met in college, both of us drawn to the same energy. Fast conversations, big dreams, and an unspoken promise that we'd have each other's backs. We shared meals, stories, even silence. He was there when I got my first rejection letter, when I lost someone I loved, when I didn't feel strong enough to stand on my own. I never imagined a time when he wouldn't be around, but time has a way of revealing cracks we never noticed. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly. Missed calls, strange excuses, a shift in the way he looked at me. And then, one day, the truth dropped like a stone, heavy and cold. He had lied. Lied about something that mattered, something that cut deep. It wasn't just the lie, it was the choice. The fact that when it counted, he chose himself. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It erodes the foundation quietly until one day you wake up and realize everything you believed in is gone. And yet, even as I stood in the rubble of that friendship, part of me still longed to understand why pain changes you. At first, I tried to pretend it didn't. I smiled in conversations, went to work, kept moving forward, as if moving fast enough could outrun the ache that lived quietly beneath my skin. But the truth is, something inside me had broken, not loudly, not violently, just permanently. I stopped trusting people. I stopped opening up. Even the simplest acts of connection felt risky. If someone I loved that deeply could hurt me so effortlessly, what chance did anyone else have? The wound wasn't just about what he did. It was about what it meant. That maybe I wasn't worth the truth. That maybe loyalty was just a story we tell ourselves until it's no longer convenient. I replayed our last conversation in my head like a scene from a film I couldn't stop watching, over and over. His excuses, my silence, the anger I swallowed because I didn't want to cry in front of him. I remember walking away that day, fists clenched, jaw tight, promising myself I'd never give him another piece of me. I built a wall so high around my heart that even I couldn't see over it. But walls don't protect you. They just trap the hurt inside. I started carrying the wound like a shadow. It followed me everywhere. In every new friendship, in every close conversation, there was always this lingering fear. What if they betray me too? What if I'm never safe? I didn't talk about it, not really. When people asked what happened, I just said, we grew apart. But the truth was uglier. He broke something I didn't know could be broken. And even though the world had moved on, I hadn't. I was still living in that moment, trying to understand how healing could ever begin from a place that hurts so much. Healing isn't a straight line. It's not a checklist or a clean upward climb. It's messy, quiet, unpredictable. Some days I woke up feeling fine, like the past had finally loosened its grip on me. Other days, it hit me out of nowhere. A smell, a song, a memory I didn't invite. Suddenly the hurt would come rushing back, like no time had passed at all. I told myself I didn't care anymore, but the truth was, I cared too much. I just didn't know what to do with that care, so I buried it beneath anger. Anger was easier. It felt powerful. It made me feel like I was in control. But underneath the anger was something softer, something I was too afraid to name. Loss, grief, loneliness. People talk about letting go like it's a switch you flip. But I was trapped in a cycle. I wanted to forgive, but I also wanted justice. I wanted peace, but I wanted him to hurt like I did. I wanted closure, but I was terrified of reopening the wound. One night, alone with my thoughts, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding. What if holding on to this pain is doing more damage than what he did to me? It was a quiet question, not an accusation. But it stayed with me. Over time, that question began to chip away at the walls I had built. I started journaling, talking, praying. I didn't realize it then, but these small steps were the beginning of something important. Honesty. Not with him. With myself. I had to admit that I was still hurting, that I hadn't moved on. That part of me still wanted to be okay. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward becoming whole again. The turning point came when I least expected it. It wasn't dramatic. There were no grand speeches or moments of clarity. It was simple. A conversation with someone who didn't know the whole story. Someone who wasn't invested in my anger or pain. Just a friend, a calm presence, asking me one thing. What would happen if you let it go? At first, I scoffed. Let it go. I'd been holding on to this hurt for so long, it felt like part of who I was. Letting go seemed like admitting defeat, like surrendering to something I couldn't control. But as the days passed, that question kept echoing in my mind. What would happen if I let it go? What if I stopped carrying the weight? What if I didn't need to punish him or myself anymore? It wasn't about excusing his actions. It wasn't about saying, what you did was fine. It was about choosing not to let his mistake define my future. About choosing peace over resentment, freedom over bitterness. Slowly, the idea started to sink in, not in my head, but in my heart. Maybe, just maybe, forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about me. I spent the next few days in a fog, torn between the urge to protect my heart and the realization that I had been protecting it with the wrong armor. The truth was, anger had only been holding me captive. The pain wasn't as sharp anymore, but it still lingered, like a dull ache that refused to go away. And I was tired of it, tired of feeling heavy, tired of feeling stuck. So I made the decision, the hardest decision I'd ever made, to forgive. Not because it was easy, but because it was the only way I could start healing. And I knew then that no matter what happened next, I was finally free. The moment of forgiveness wasn't a cinematic scene where everything felt perfect. It wasn't a grand gesture, but a quiet surrender, an acceptance of what had been and what I could no longer change. When I finally saw him again, I wasn't sure what I expected. The words came slowly, hesitantly, almost as if they were unfamiliar to me. "I forgive you," I said, and it was the hardest thing I'd ever spoken. There was no flood of relief, no sudden rush of peace. Instead, it felt like a strange silence between us, as if the air itself had paused to witness the weight of the moment. I didn't feel lighter immediately. I didn't feel as though the past had been erased, but I did feel something shift inside me, a quiet release. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about pretending the hurt didn't matter. It was about choosing to stop allowing the hurt to control me. In that moment, I realized something vital. Forgiveness wasn't just for him. It was for me. It was the permission I needed to let go of a part of my past that had kept me anchored in pain. We didn't talk much after that. It wasn't necessary. The words had been spoken. The past was still there, but I no longer carried it like a heavy burden, dragging it through every day. We moved forward, each of us in our own direction, but something inside me felt different, softer, maybe, more at peace with myself. It wasn't the closure I thought I needed, but in a way, it was better. It was the beginning of something new, the possibility of healing, of being whole again. And for the first time in years, I realized that sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward. The days after I forgave him were strange. It wasn't like the sky cleared up, or everything fell perfectly into place. There was no dramatic shift, no instant closure. But something subtle had changed in me. I could breathe deeper. I could go through my day without the weight of resentment hanging over me like a dark cloud. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. I wasn't replaying our last conversation in my mind, trying to find the moment I could have changed the outcome. I was finally free from that. But freedom didn't mean forgetting. The memories didn't vanish, and the scars didn't disappear. They were still there, reminders of what had happened, reminders of how far I'd come. But they weren't as sharp anymore. They didn't have the same power they once did. The hurt no longer controlled my every thought. I could look back on the pain and see it for what it was, a part of my story. But not the whole story. As I moved forward, I realized that forgiveness wasn't a single event. It was a process, one that required me to keep choosing peace, to keep choosing healing every day. I began to open up again, slowly. The walls I had built around my heart didn't come down all at once, but they began to crack. I started trusting people again, not because I thought they wouldn't hurt me, but because I had learned that I didn't have to carry the weight of everyone's mistakes. Forgiveness had given me more than I expected. It had given me the chance to reclaim my peace, my future. It wasn't easy, and I wasn't perfect at it, but I was learning that healing wasn't about the absence of pain. It was about making peace with it and moving forward anyway. As time passed, I realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't the end of my journey. It was the beginning. I thought it would give me the closure I had been desperately seeking, but instead, it opened a door to a deeper understanding of myself. Forgiveness had stripped away the layers of bitterness and fear I had wrapped myself in, revealing parts of me I had forgotten. I began to see that holding on to old wounds had kept me stuck, not just in the past, but in a version of myself I no longer recognized. By forgiving, I had chosen to stop letting that pain define who I was becoming. It didn't mean I forgot the lessons I had learned from that betrayal, but it meant I was no longer bound by it. The anger, the resentment, the heartbreak, it no longer had a hold on me. I had taken back my power. But forgiveness didn't just change how I viewed the past. It changed how I viewed the future. I had been afraid of opening my heart to others, afraid of being hurt again. But I understood now that vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was the courage to love even after you've been hurt. It was the willingness to trust again, to give someone a piece of yourself, knowing that they might not always treat it with care. Forgiveness had given me the space to heal, but it also gave me a gift I hadn't expected. Hope. Hope that, despite the scars, I could still move forward. Hope that the future wasn't defined by the past. And in that hope, I found a kind of freedom. Freedom not from pain, but from the belief that I had to carry it alone forever. Looking back, I realize how much I underestimated the power of forgiveness. It wasn't a quick fix or a magic solution. It didn't erase the pain, but it allowed me to let go of the need to control it. Holding on to anger kept me trapped, waiting for something that might never come. Closure. But forgiveness gave me peace. It was about choosing to move forward, not for him, but for me. It taught me that healing starts with letting go, not of the past, but of the control the past has over us. I also realized that forgiving myself was just as important. We often carry the weight of our own mistakes, but true healing comes from understanding that we are all imperfect and deserving of growth. If this story resonates with you, remember, healing begins with the choice to let go. Don't let your past define you. If you found this video helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of growth and healing.